The GX finale was Jaden about to defeat Yugi by TGS Anime. You will all know my love of GX. I absolutely loved it. And it's unfortunate that we never officially got season 4 in, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, at least in the dub. It was obviously released in Japan, but it was never subbed and made its way over here in the US. We did, however, have a very interesting dubism from Ubel, which I can't say the funny word that was allegedly said by Ubel. That was a funny 4Kids dub moment, actually. God, I love Ubel. But this is post Ubel. Ubel and the Supreme King, spoilers, became one. Jaden survived the Dark World, and we had an entire arc of dealing with Mr. T. No, I'm not even kidding. Leading into, was it Fubuki, I think was his name? Dealing with him, and finally kind of getting closure to what happened, the abandoned dorm on GX Island. Well, Duel Academy Island, I should say. And we went into kind of Jaden versus Darkness Incarnate itself. A little bit of an escalation. But after that, we kind of get into Jaden having a moment of he lost something along the way. He used to be different, but what was it? And this was truly one of the best duels that we could have asked for, and it was very fitting. And if you haven't seen it, one, you should definitely watch the finale when you get to it. Two, if you want to watch this uncut, you should absolutely go watch this on TGS Anime's channel. This definitely deserves a lot more views, and I love seeing topics like this covered, especially in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. But alas, with some Kip commentary, let's get into it.
A lot of people might not know this because it was never actually released internationally, but the final duel of the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX series is actually between the main characters,
yeah,
the
Yu-Gi-Oh!
GX series, Jaden Yuki, and the former protagonist of the original series, Yugi Muto. Honestly, if you saw this duel, it was really cool to see. However, despite this epic duel, the duel ends ambiguous and is left up to the viewers to decide who actually won the duel.
Wow, we're getting right into it. Grats, now you know how it ended. But there's a little more nuance to that.
So I thought for today, how about we analyze the entirety of the duel, judge all the decisions made throughout the duel, and see, at the end, who really was going to win this duel. Was it Jaden, or was it Yugi? Let's find out. We should probably have a little bit of context. How is this duel even happening in the first place? Isn't Yu-Gi-Oh! GX set in the future?
Time paradox. Well, not time paradox, but time shenanigans. There's a Yugi's deck for a portion of the anime was actually showcased at GX Island. It was actually season 1, I think, versus Dimitri. And it seems like it's still there in some capacity. And Jaden is thus drawn to this deck by some force. And on touching this deck, it ends up putting him, kind of throwing him into, I don't think it's necessarily the past, but kind of his pocket dimension, so to speak. I guess technically it could be the past due to Atem actually being there.
Well, you see, at the end of the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX series, Jaden leaves Duel Academy, but before he does, he takes a look at Yugi's deck that's on display. Here, an adult Yugi appears, telling him that he has lost something, and that he doesn't realize what has actually gone. What did he lose? Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later.
It's really
Regardless,
important.
Jaden is then transported to a kind of pocket dimension that is frozen in time, set in the past when Yugi and Atem were still together, and as well, Yugi is still in possession.
Wait a minute.
Set in the past when Yugi and Atem.
Oh my god, they're self-aware. Joey Wheeler. It's self-aware. My god. Yeah, they knew about it. They knew.
We're still together, and as well, Yugi is still in possession of all 3 god cards. The implication of this, why he's dueling Yugi in the past rather than the one in the present, is this is Yugi in his prime. He's around the same age as Jaden, he possesses all 3 of the god cards, and he still has his partner with him, Atem. And it is
actually. So this I was thinking about this the other day at like 3 a.m. because what else do I do at 3 a.m.? I just think about things, right? So Ubel in season 3 of GX had access. I'm sorry for the pause for him. I'm so sorry. Yu-Gi-Oh! GX season 3, we saw Ubel, Jesse Ubel specifically, had multiple decks. So, like, one of them was the Advanced Crystal Beast deck, right? That was obviously Jesse's deck, but, you know, infused with darkness. The second was Sacred Beast deck. We don't know, I think, what happened. Do we know what happened to the Sacred Beast? I'm probably missing a sub-ism from season 4. I'm probably missing something in there. But, like, it's very possible, you know, barring information that I'm missing, either the Sacred Beast deck was left with Jesse after Yubel, you know, didn't possess him anymore, and Jesse just turned it into, like, I don't know, Chancellor Separate or something like that. Or Jaden might have access to the Sacred Beast, depending if Yubel kept it or not. So, like, that's just one of those unaccounted for, like, plot points that I'm hitting season 4 pretty soon on my rewatch. I'm gonna keep an eye out for it. Like, the Sacred Beasts, someone has them. I don't know who has them, but someone has them, and that would be an interesting parallel to go up against the Egyptian gods, but obviously it's not going to happen because of plot reasons.
Here, that the duel begins. Let's take a look, shall we? The duel begins with Jaden going first. He draws, and we see his starting hand. It consists of elemental hero Neos, Avion Bastinatrix, Polymerization. You
like that Neos is an ultra rare? Oh my god. I don't think I've actually ever seen... Well, no, I've had to have seen. I haven't seen 1, 2, and 3's subs. But yeah, like, Neos is an ultra confirmed. Kagemaru resealed them. Stayed in season 1, maybe? because Kagemaru resealed them. Well, so they were taken from Kagemaru. Chancellor Shepard resealed them. But then in season 3, the capsule was still there. And that's when Yubel broke the seal of the Sacred Beasts with Exodia during the Exodia-Adrian fight. And that's when Yubel, taking over Marcel, claimed the Sacred Beasts. And then obviously Jesse was there with Rainbow Dragon, keeping the portal open, leading into the Dark World arc, leading into Supreme King Jaden, leading into the final confrontation where Yubel used the Sacred Beasts against Adrian Gecko, and Echo was actually what caused Adrian to lose that fight. And we really don't see them after that. So I'll have to see what happens after Jaden gets back from the Dark World in season 4. After Yubel, it might be a Kagemaru, because there was a scene with Kagemaru and Sartorius, and they come and talk to Jaden. Like, that's one of those that, if you know in the comments, let me know. But that is one of those plot points that I have not accounted for.
Negate Attack, and Neos Force. He starts by fusing his Avion and Bastinatrix with Polymerization to make
It has to be Kagemaru then.
Which, keep in mind, was his original boss monster from the earlier parts of the series. So, this...
Keep in mind throughout this duel that this is going to be the characters as they progress through time, so to speak. So you're going to have Jaden start off with plays to make Elemental Hero Flare Wingman, right?
Kind of fitting that he makes it first. And also, the reason he summons Flame Wingman so early, despite not having much protection for it, is it is set up for later, as if things go pear-shaped, he can use it for the summon of Shining Flare Wingman. He ends his turn by setting Negate Attack. It's Yugi's turn, and he draws, and his hand is also shown to us. Thank you so much, Anime, for showing us hands, by the way. I hate it when you leave it ambiguous and I have to reverse engineer the duels.
It actually is such a really neat detail. Like, if you're making a series or a game like this, like, or a, I guess, novel, whatever, right? If you're making a form of media like this helps people so much.
Thank you. His hand contains Dark Magician, Obnoxious Celtic Guardian, Mystical Elf, Mirror Force, Magical Dimension, and Shift. He summons Mystical Elf and uses Magical Dimension to...
At least according to the wiki, when Jesse Anderson reappears when he was possessed by Yubel, he uses them in a deck based around Click Some of the Sacred Beasts and Armatal for his duel against Adrian Gecko. Yes, and then all the Yubel didn't use them in their final duel with Jaden. Raviel was shown to be in her deck, and Yubel merged with Jaden. They are safely returned to their resting place. Interesting. I wonder. Well, and here's the thing: in season 1, it was also. I love how we're segueing into like other GX things rather than the actual fun. I mean, this is also, I guess, context for like parallels here as well, so I can kind of justify it as that, right? I like that Magical Dimension's a rare though, because Kagemaru needed, at least in the dub, it could be different in the sub. In season 1, when Kagemaru was fighting Jaden, it's like, I need one more thing to control the sacred beast. Your soul, Jaden, right? That kind of thing. So, hypothetically, Jaden could be safeguarding the sacred beasts? Because he's really the only one that showcased that he can kind of stand up to stuff like that. I mean, look what he's done throughout the series. He's the only duelist that didn't really lose his spirit key. He fought Camula. He fought Amnail, right? Where Amnail just completely endgamed a lot of the other key keepers who still have their keys, right? Took on Kagemaru. Yes, he did use, Sabatiel, the Philosopher's Stone given to by Amnail / Banner, right? But that's, whatever. Season 2, he has to go up against Aster Phoenix, loses the first one, almost gets consumed by the Light of Destruction, comes back with Neospatians, beats Aster Phoenix, and proceeds to just wipe floor with Sartorius? It was close, but yeah, he proceeds to fight Sartorius, who is putting him in a weird position because of, satellite laser timing and stuff, which going into season 3 then, we have him finally finding someone that, Jesse, right, who everyone else relies on Jaden for everything. Showcase, point in case, right? In the Dark World, you have, Jay, let's go find Jaden. Yeah, let's go find Jaden. Sir Freed's like, sure, go do it, I guess, right? I got my own things to do. And they all get captured, like, immediately after leaving. Like, sorry, Jaden. Like, they want to do things, but they always look to Jaden. And the stress starts to get to him as early as, like, season 1. And he kind of gets over it with, Amnail, right? He kind of comes to closure. Season 2, especially with the Light of Destruction, he's getting stressed out because so much rides on him. Season 3, in the Viper fight, he's really hurting. Going into Dark World, yeah, he's driven. He wants to find Jesse. He wants to find that person that's really been on his level. And it's just, it hurts him that, he wasn't able to save Jesse, and he regrets it, especially when he knows and feels guilty that Bell was at the heart of that, right? So yeah, he's going to go towards the Dark World, but then everyone else says, we're not letting you go without us, but then everyone else starts to turn on him. Part of that was due to King Braun's influence, right? But that's kind of why I like season 4, is Jaden kind of just leans back for a little bit, and it's just like, look, like, I've helped you guys do a lot of this. You guys got to put in that work. Like, you guys have your own things you got to do. I've got my own things I got to do. Where you have things like Jaden fighting Mr. T, and Jaden coming down blowing up Kaiba Core building and fighting literal darkness incarnate. And so through all that, yes, Jaden has lost something leading to this fight. Whereas, Yugi goes through his own trials and tribulations. He really couldn't do a lot of the things without Atem. And early in Duelist Kingdom, going through both sides, right? And then going through Duelist Kingdom, he didn't even want to use Atem's power anymore, the power of the puzzle, because it almost cost Seto Kaiba his life, which that was a dick move by Kaiba, let's be real, standing on the castle edge, right? But, he blamed himself and said that he wasn't going to do that. And it took coming face-to-face with Pegasus and having that mind shuffle kind of plot point to really solidify that, I can do certain things and I can help, which then we go into Battle City and Yugi having to make growth on his own, right? Having to beat Joey without the Pharaoh's help, and Battle City beating Merrick, stuff like that. And which leads to the final duel in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters of Yugi. There was a scene where Yugi used something to stop Slifer from coming back from the grave, which was symbolic of, the dead don't have a place here. And then beating Atem means that Atem can move on in peace. So you kind of have a Yugi that's around just after the events of Battle City, but Atem is still around. So you kind of have this Yugi that is, for all intents and purposes, a very skilled duelist. And you have Jaden, who has had to defeat Darkness Incarnate, Fubuki being possessed by darkness, had to go through being the Supreme King, the trauma that came with that, having to defeat the Light of Destruction, having to be the only one that really could come against the Sacred Beasts, and that is the character growth at both points that has led to this point. There's a lot of context that I just threw at you. Yeah.
To tribute Mystical Elf to special summon Dark Magician. He then destroys Flame Wingman through Magical Dimension's secondary effect. Yugi attempts to attack directly, but negates his attack with Negate Attack.
Spell speed 3 negate attack, baby. Which also shows that they're both top tier duelists, right? Jaden has a very strong opening, but Yugi just crushes him with Magical Dimension and tries to fling, just throw a direct attack at it with Dark Magician, thus negating it. They threw punches at each other. Nothing quite stuck, but they're both very competent.
It's actually a really good name for a card, isn't it? It's very to the point. Yugi ends by setting both his Shift and Mirror Force trap cards face down. Jaden's turn, and he draws Elemental Hero Bubbleman. He normal summons it in defense, then, due to its anime effect, it allows Jaden to draw 2 cards.
The biggest thing about Bubbleman in the anime is Bubbleman gets his effect if you Cyber Dragon him, if there's no cards on your field, and I think it's no sponsors specifically. No, sorry, I think it's the only card on your field. You can special summon it, and if it's the only card on your field, you may draw 2 cards. That's not how that works in the TCG. That's not how it works outside of the anime, because Bubbleman has to be the only card on your field and was the only card in your hand to get that draw 2.
The cards he draws are A Hero Emerges and Death and Rebirth. He ends by setting those 2 cards face down along with his Neos Force. Why did he set his Neos Force as well? Well, the reason he did that is because he's got A Hero Emerges face down, which picks a random card in his hand, he's able to special summon it. So a tactic he normally does is he just gets rid of everything in his hand, and as long as he's got 1 monster in there, guarantees the summon and sets him up next turn.
Yeah, you have to pick a random card in your hand. What if you only have 1? Well, I guess you're picking that card.
His turn, and he draws 1,000 Knives. He normal summons his obnoxious Celtic Guardian, then uses 1,000 Knives to destroy Jaden's Bubbleman. Dark Magician then attempts to attack directly again, but Jaden uses A Hero Emerges, summoning Elemental Hero Neos straight to the field. Yugi chooses not to trade with Dark Magician here, since he knows it would be protected by Mirror Force next turn if Jaden decides to attack.
Yeah.
So, he ends his turn here. It's Jaden's turn, and he draws Card Trooper. He summons it, then uses its effect to send the top 3 cards of his deck to the graveyard. Which
Jaden has such weird cards like that, too. Like, he's got, like, Dark Catapulter, Card Trooper. What else? He has some just Rallis the Starbird. He just has some really weird additions, like Card Ejector and stuff. And it's always interesting to see, like, what his fill slots are.
Let's be honest here, the cards that go to the graveyard are the definition of protagonist luck. Out of everything in Jaden's deck, 2 of the cards that go to the graveyard are his only 2 graveyard specialization cards. Those are Elemental Hero Necro Gardener and Elemental Hero Necroshade. Spark Blaster also goes to the grave, but let's be honest here, that's not a massive loss really. Card Trooper's attack increases to 1900. Then
that's one of those things that, like, man, if I Card Troopered, I'd lose my Branded Fusion, my Alibur, and like a Keeper Dragon magic. That would never be that good.
Jaden activates and equips his Neos Force spell onto Neos, increasing its attack by 800, making it stronger than Dark Magician. Not only that, but Neos Force actually allows the user to inflict damage equal to the attack of the destroyed monster. However, during the end phase, it is shuffled back into the deck. Neos attacks Dark Magician, but Yugi then plays Mirror Force, destroying all of Jaden's monsters. Card Trooper's effect kicks in here, allowing Jaden to draw upon its destruction.
Credits card called Gunner in the OCG. Forgot about that.
The card he drew here was the equipped spell Impact Flip. Now this draw, and this card specifically, is actually a crucial moment in the duel. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but it's not a good thing. Jaden plays his Death and Rebirth trap to destroy Dark Magician and then summon back his Neos. However,
that's one of those weird isms that, like, because some of Jaden's cards, like, actually make sense and showcase, like, wisdom underneath all of the dingus, if that makes sense. Like, Death and Rebirth being a card. It's like, oh, like, that's actually a really intelligent play, Jaden. Like, I was not expecting that. Right? And he has a couple of those throughout the series that he'll play something, and it's like, wow, that actually was a really good play. Like, okay. Like, he'll, it's not tribute. Is it true? Yeah, it's like Tribute to the Doomed he used in, like, season 1. And he used, like, emergency provisions as a quick play multiple times, and, like, that was kind of super big brain but very on brand for him. Some of these one-offs he just has are just really interesting.
Yugi uses Shift to make it so obnoxious Celtic Guardian is destroyed instead. Then, due to the secondary effect of Death and Rebirth, Neos is forced to battle Dark Magician, with both aces being destroyed simultaneously.
Flash.
It's Yugi's turn, and he draws Alpha the Magnet Warrior. And since this is the only card that he has, he summons it and attacks directly.
Yeah, he pulls out that Jaden has Solemn Judgment in versus the Jinzo duel. Like, yeah, like, he just has some, like, really good stuff sometimes. Which, I mean, also leads into the conversation we were having in the 5Ds video about The card game is a vehicle for the narrative and character traits to poke through in a way that's interactive to the audience and can sell products, that kind of thing. Not going to rehash that. You should go watch the 5D's video.
However, the attack is negated through Jaden banishing his Necro Gardener in the grave. It's Jaden's turn and he draws Elemental Hero Sparkman. He summons it and attacks over Yugi's Alpha the Magnet Warrior, dealing the first damage of the game on turn 6. It's Yugi's turn. He draws Swift Gaia the Fierce Knight. And since it's the only card in Yugi's hand, he's allowed to normal summon it without a tribute. Gaia then attacks and destroys Sparkman, dealing damage to Jaden. It's Jaden's turn and he draws Blade Edge. He uses the effect of Elemental Hero Necroshade to normal summon Blade Edge without a tribute. He then activates Impact Flip and equips it to the monster. Now, just to let you all know, for those that don't know, Impact Flip is a anime exclusive card. And its effect
there's a lot of those throughout the animes. But yeah, no, this is,
is once per turn, you can flip one face-down defense position monster your opponent controls face up. Flip effects are not activated at this time. When the equipped monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, send the top card of your opponent's deck to the graveyard. When this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, both players draw one card. That first effect isn't too bad, right?
No.
If you're playing someone that has flip effect monsters, it's quite a strong ability.
Man in your bug out.
Right? Well, no, because this is the Yu-Gi-Oh anime. No one sets their cards face down.
No one sets their cards face down unless they're supposed to be set face down, and then you know that there's a plan.
Summon in face-up defense, so this is a completely useless ability. Well, how about its second effect? Sending the top card of your opponent's deck to the graveyard. Ooh, this is kind of a 50-50, really. Graveyard effects do exist in the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX series.
Yes.
And I know this is early Yu-Gi-Oh!, but even in this duel, we have seen graveyard effect monsters. Well, how about its third effect? Well, it lets your opponent draw a card, but you're also drawing a card, so again, this benefits your opponent just as much as it benefits you. To summarize, this card should not be in Jaden's deck. It doesn't help his strategy to win a duel. It doesn't really fit with his deck's dynamic or anything. And the only reason it seems to be in here is so that it can mill a card from the top of Yugi's deck, which just so happens to be the only graveyard effect monster that Yugi has in his deck. But I am going to be fair, since Jaden did get 2 incredibly lucky mills earlier in the duel, it's only right that Yugi also gets the same similar level of luck. Since
I mean, there was the plot point back in season 1 where Jaden was trying to use his brain to defeat Zane, and thus Zane was having an issue. Like, I thought I was here to duel Jaden Yuki. I don't know who's standing here in front of me, but this isn't the Jaden I know, right? It could also be Jaden finally having that experience to not only duel with his heart, but also duel with his brain as well. And thus, this theoretically could work in, like, thinking of a niche circumstance.
When Blade Edge attacks and destroys Swift Gaia the Fierce Knight, Impact Flip forces Yugi to send the top card of his deck to the graveyard, which just so happens to be Beast of Gilfer. Now, this is a little bit naughty of Yugi, but in the end it doesn't really matter because Jaden couldn't have changed the outcome no matter what. But when Beast of Gilfer is sent to the graveyard, it's supposed to immediately equip onto your opponent's monster. This doesn't happen until later, and you actually do see a little bit later on Yugi's duel disc, it's not actually in his spell and trap zone, so it equips during Jaden's turn.
Don't worry, there's some anime-isms at play here. There's one egregious one later, but there's some anime-isms.
This is just for suspense. Makes it more interesting for the viewers, so we can suspend disbelief. It's not a big deal. Now it's Yugi's turn. He activates probably one of the 5 most busted cards in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Card of Sanctity.
Yeah, Card of Sanctity. There's a reason that doesn't have the same effect as it does in the anime. Ooh.
Which lets both players draw until they have 6 cards each. And since neither duelist had a hand, they both get the full benefits of the spell.
Something like Card of Sanctity kind of works in this setting, though, right? From a TCG, from a game balancing standpoint, Card of Sanctity does not work. However, in terms of, like, pushing the narrative forward, yeah, having a card like Pot of Greed, where you get a +1, or having a card like Card of Demise or Card of Sanctity, that will push the characters forward because it gives them a hand size again. It gives them gas again. So you can easily use this as a narrative solution to push characters forward, to push the plot forward. You just have to acknowledge that that's anime specific, story specific, and not really something that's going to be good for game balance. Unless your game's set up for that. Like, I remember Pokemon TCG has, like, the Professor line of cards, like Professor Juniper, Professor Sycamore, Professor Oak, etc., where it's like discard your hand and draw 7. You have a supporter, like, what supporters can only be used once per turn, to be fair, as well, so that's a restriction that they inherently have. But you also have, like, the quote-unquote rival supporters like How, Hop, that was just like support or draw 3. And it's like, man, can you imagine if you had a card to discard your hand and draw 7 in Yu-Gi-Oh? Like, you could only play 1 per turn, but you could play max copies of that. How busted it would be. Yeah. So this I view as, whenever I see this in a duel, it is them writing, I need to move this duel forward. I need to make sure that the plot is able to continue. We're going to use Card of Sanctity and or Pot of Greed and or any other relevant thing to artificially buff that hand size. And understanding that point made it make a lot more sense to me.
Benefits of the spell. Yugi draws Watapon, Dark Magician Girl, Mystical Ref Panel, Magic Cylinder, Dark Renewal, and Kuribo. Jaden drew Heroes Guild, Contact Out, Neo Space, Miracle Contact, Miracle Fusion, and Subspace Battle. Now, since Yugi drew into Watapon, it is special summoned, which he sacrifices for Dark Magician Girl, which also gains an additional 300 attack since Dark Magician is in the grave. Dark Magician Girl then attacks and destroys Blade Edge, since it was, surprise, weakened by Gilfer. The third effect of Impact Flip kicks in here, letting both players draw 1 card. Yugi draws Magical Hats, while Jaden draws Code Change. Yugi ends by setting 3 cards face down: Mystical Ref Panel, Magic Cylinder, and Dark Renewal. It is at this point in the duel where Jaden has a moment to reflect on what he's lost. What Jaden had lost was dueling for fun. The countless life.
Yeah, that one was actually, I can't remember which professor that was. So yeah, this Viper duel, he was having a hard time with him. Like, he was hurting during this one. And then you have, I really can't remember his name, but in the dub, he was just like super boring professor that like used to have a dueling career, but because he was going to effectively college, he couldn't pursue his pro career, and thus is a teacher, quote unquote, teaching little snot-nosed brats, right? Like, he had a lot of really crappy things he had to go through.
Jaden had lost was dueling for fun.
He was based off the Ferris Bueller guy, at least in the dub.
Experienced over the course of the 3 years he was at Duel Academy had really taken its toll on him, and only through this duel was he able to get back to the way he was when he first appeared to us in the Yu-Gi-Oh series. Only now, maybe just a little bit more wiser. It's honestly a really nice moment, and they both have a little bit of a laugh about it, how serious they were kind of taking the duel. Now it's Jaden's turn with a brand new outlook on dueling, and the card he draws is Winged Kuribo. His
That's a hand.
Here is pretty mad, to be honest with you, with 7
That's a
spells.
hand.
He activates Heroes Guild.
What 7 spells? What's he playing? Sky Striker, am I right?
Its effect is once per turn, you can have both players send the top card of their decks to the grave, and if a warrior-type monster is sent to the grave this way, the player who sent it can add it to the hand. If a card is added to a player's hand by this effect, destroy this card. He uses this effect straight away, and the card sent is Neospatian Grand Mole, while Yugi's was his Slifer the Sky Dragon.
Yeah, it was.
Since neither is a warrior, both are supposed to go to the grave.
This was one of those that, like, I think this was actually censored. I think this was censored. No, this was the actual text. I thought there was another one. Yeah, Code Change was really strange. Like, that, I guess I can kind of logic it to be in Jaden's deck because it has many different types, right? He's got warriors, beasts. Yeah. Like, I guess technically I can justify it, but this one was an odd addition that he had.
However, Jaden plays Code Change to change the text on Heroes Guild from Warrior to Rock, so he can add Grand Mole to his hand.
He's a rock.
However, Yugi activates his face-down Mystical Ref Panel to negate the effect of Code Change and seal
Mystical Ref Panel has some interesting rulings to it.
Its effect, able to use it later in the duel when he wants to. This right here is Yugi setting up his end game for victory.
Yes, it is.
After this, Jaden activates Subspace Battle, allowing each player to select 3 monster cards from their deck. Then the player who reveals the monsters with the lowest attacks takes 500 damage for each one and sends them to the graveyard, while the player who had the higher attack ones gets to add them to their hand. Yugi instinctively chooses his 3 most powerful monsters: Buster Blader, Blackluster Soldier, and Valkyrion the Magna Warrior. However, Jaden
beating Valkyrion at that 35 is going to be rough.
Cleverly chose 3 monsters he simply wanted to be sent to the graveyard for the use of his Miracle Contact and Miracle Fusion spells.
Which shows the difference between them as a duelist. Like, both of them are thinking, but both of them have different goals that they're trying to get to. Both of them have a different endgame in mind. Just as skilled as each other, but there's one of them absolutely wants to go one way, where the other admits they want to go the other way.
Yugi wins all 3 battles and gets to add all 3 cards to his hand. No idea why he didn't pick Obelisk the Tormentor here, because we know it's in his deck, because at the start of the duel, Jaden saw it with his good evil vision thing. So that was a little bit strange, I guess. But it doesn't really matter. Jaden's down to 1600 life points now, so everything works out. So at this point of the duel, Yugi's hand now consists of Valkyrion, Buster Blader, Blackluster Soldier, Karibo, and Magical Hats. This is where Jaden begins his endgame play. He activates Miracle Fusion, banishing Elemental Hero Flame Wingman and Elemental Hero Sparkman he'd set up earlier in the duel to summon Elemental Hero Shining Flare Wingman with 4,600 attack through its effect. He then uses Miracle Contact to return Neos, Flare Scarab, and Grand Mole from his graveyard back into his deck in order to special summon Elemental Hero Magma Neos, which has 5,400 attack through its effect and is then boosted even further when he activates Neo's Space, amplifying it.
This is actually kind of him coming at Yugi with his all, right? For his season 1 deck, right? With Shining Flare Wingman, arguably, I mean, Electrum's technically a little stronger, right? But iconic season 1 card in Shining Flare Wingman, iconic season 2 in Magma Neos, right? Yeah, Magma Neos was season 2, right? I think it was.
To 6,300 attack.
Big numbers.
Both these monsters for Jaden represent the pinnacles of each of his parts of dueling. It's his Elemental Hero Ultimate form, and it's his Neospatian Ultimate form. And if either of these monsters are successful in their attacks...
Magma was 3. Okay, well, it's the pinnacle of Elemental Hero and Neospatian then.
Well, he wins the duel. And so, Magma Neos attacks, but Yugi plays Magic Cylinder to negate the attack and inflict the damage back to Jaden.
At least it is a trap card. Like, the anime had progressed enough that it is a trap card.
Jaden quickly activates his quick play, Contact out to defuse his monster and summon its parts to the field.
But then at that point it misses target and therefore doesn't deal the damage to Jaden because it was directing it back at the monster, which that is like, it's kind of interesting because that's like season 1. No, that's more like Battle City, right? Like that's Battle City, Duel Monsters, Magic Cylinder versus how GX works.
And fun fact, by the way, this isn't shenanigans. I saw a few people say that you can't negate Magic Cylinder like this. You actually can. Magic Cylinder targets the monster that attacked. So
wait a minute. No, we're going to learn a thing today.
if that monster is removed and the target isn't there anymore, so the effect can't resolve. This is fine. No shenanigans. Good play, Jaden.
I actually didn't know this. I thought that it was still retained target. I didn't know that it actually fizzled the target. I guess that's fair, actually. Huh. See, and that's why the worst... I keep saying the worst thing you can do is to tell someone to play Yu-Gi-Oh!, hand them the rulebook. It is the worst thing you can do to them. Like yeah, they'll understand how to put cards down, but they're not going to understand the games or the rulings that come up like that. What fusion? The fusion's gone.
Shining Flare Wingman then attacks for what could be game, but Yami Yugi decides to take over the duel from here. Yami plays Dark Renewal to tribute his Dark Magician Girl and Jaden's Neospatian Grand Mole in order to summon a Dark Spellcaster from either his deck or his graveyard. Initially, it seems that he's trying to get out his Dark Magician again, but looks can be deceiving. It is revealed that he can use the effect of Code Change since it was sealed in Mystical Ref panel. He changes the text on Dark Renewal from Spellcaster to Divine Beast. However, if we're being technical, he's only changing the type of the monster, not the attribute. He needed to change the attribute as well to a Divine, so it needed to be a Divine Beast. So, I don't know. I don't think you're really allowed to do that, Yugi.
It's okay. It's Yugi. We just expect this.
But alright, sure. It's the anime, whatever. Through this allows Yami to special summon Slifer the Sky Dragon from his graveyard, which gains 1,000 attack and defense for each card in his hand. Since he has 5, this totals 5,000 attack. A replay then occurs, and Jaden chooses not to attack with his Shining Flare Wingman, since it is weaker. And it is here that Yugi declares that this will be where their true match will begin. Jaden is pumped. The music swells, and Jaden seemingly attacks Yugi's god with his Neos. And freeze frame.
Yep.
The conclusion to the duel is never revealed. We cut to a little bit later that day. Jaden says a couple of things, but we never find out the conclusion. Oh, why do they do this to us? I wanted to watch the end. However, Jaden has had his love for dueling restored, and he's ready to take on the next great adventure in his life. So it is a nice ending. So that's all we get. We need to now take a look at this, where we get left off with, and establish who would have won if we carried on seeing the duel from this. Let's take a look.
That's also under the assumption that Jaden used Neos to attack.
Let's get one misconception out the way. Just because the duel ends with Jaden seemingly attacking Slifer with Neos doesn't mean that is actually what he did. All that is just a nice cinematic way of ending the series.
Yeah.
And a final freeze frame of Jaden's ace monster that helped him through loads of battles, going up against a literal god, against the best duelist of all time. It's really cool. That doesn't mean that this actually happened, though. It's just the way they wanted to end the series.
Right.
So, most likely, that's not what Jaden did. As, of course, if he did, he would have taken 2,500 damage and lost the duel. So what happened next, then? Well, let's take a look at the field and see what we're working with. Jaden's field contains 3 monsters. Neos with 2,500 attack, Flare Scarab with 500 attack, and Shining Flare Wingman with 4,600 attack. He has no cards in his spell and trap zone, and only 1 card left in his hand, which is Winged Karibo, and his life points sit at a mere 1,600. Yugi has only 1 monster on his side of the field with Slifer the Sky Dragon with 5,000 attack, which, keep in mind, every time Jaden summons a monster, it will decrease their attack by 2,000, and if it is...
Which he can't summon Grand Mole at that point. Yeah, so if he tries to summon the mole, right, it's just going to decrease it by 2,000 because it only has 900 attack, and thus since it hits 0, it's going to blow up.
Reduced to 0, he gets destroyed. Yugi also has no cards in his back row. However, he does have 5 cards in his hand, which are Karibo, Buster Blader, Blackluster Soldier, Valkyrion the Magna Warrior, Magical Hats, and his life points sit at a whopping 3,500.
To be fair, yeah, this is like a pretty bricky hand other than Magical Hats and Karibo.
Now, based on this, it does seem that Yugi is pretty stacked to win this duel. 5k monster on the field, really broken, can't be affected by most things. Pretty substantial hand as well. Well, that's one way of looking at it, but perhaps not. This is how the rest of Jaden's turn most likely would have gone. After Slifer is summoned, doesn't attack. Instead, he goes into his main phase 2 and contact fuses again with Flare Scarab and Neos to make Flare Neos.
And that would put Neos and Flare Scarab into the grave, probably putting Shining Flare Wingman above 5k at that point, right?
It would have 2,500 original attack, which is then boosted to 3,400 through its effect and Neo Space combined. However, then it would lose 2,000 attack since Slifer is on the field, which would make it 1,400. So I'm assuming Flare Neos would be summoned in defense position, simply as more protection. Also, since Jaden hasn't normal summoned, he can set Wing Karibo for additional defense if he wanted to. However, again, this is the anime. He's not setting Wing Karibo.
No.
I think he'll hold on to that. Now, this is the big thing. The Egyptian god. Egyptian gods. Fun fact, if you summon an Egyptian god from the graveyard, it has to go to the grave again at the end of the turn. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. And that's a restriction on them because that was more for plot convenience, and the printed versions have that as well, and it's actually much to their detriment. But yes, so because Slifer was summoned from the grave at the end of the turn, it would go to the grave again because it can't stay.
That's right. As soon as Jaden ends his turn, Slifer goes straight to the graveyard, and this completely shifts the paradigm of this duel. Jaden is actually in a much superior position as soon as he ends his turn. And now this duel really is far from over. There's loads left to do. It would now be Yugi's turn and he would draw. But here is where it gets into complete speculation.
Because we don't know what he's going to draw. There's no, unless there's a design interview, unless there's something that just we discover, right? There's no way to know.
I have no idea of knowing what he could draw because there's so many more cards left in Yugi's deck. Anything I say from this point on, it's speculation. It's just
like he could draw he could draw Obelisk, he could draw Ra, he could draw a Brick, he could draw Alpha Beta Gamma Magic Warrior, Baphomet, he could draw Dark Magical Curtain. Like there's so much that he can draw. There's no way to know.
What I personally think would happen. What could he draw? Another god card? Blacklist.
He could draw, as far as I'm aware, he might have access to Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, right? He might actually have that in his deck, depending. Which actually, so how we would actually calculate this is take all relevant cards that he could potentially draw, right? Every single card he could potentially draw within reason, right? And then you run the simulation of every one of those duels, how that would go. And then technically you'd have to do that for Jaden too, because if that goes to Jaden's next turn, right? You know, that kind of thing, right? And so then you would take out of all of these draws from Jaden and Yugi, what is the average win rate for each of them? Do they have an even 50-50? Would Yugi win 66% of the time or more? Would Jaden win 60% of the time or more? That kind of thing, right?
The ritual so he can get his Blackluster Soldier out. Maybe he gets his Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning. We know he has that card. We saw it in Dimitri's deck earlier in the series. That would be quite a cool card to get out. However, what I think would make more sense is probably something like Monster Reborn.
Yeah.
Why Monster Reborn? Well, with Monster Reborn, he can bring back his Dark Magician, and since he's got magical hats in his hand, he can actually stall out a few more turns and use a bit of a nostalgic card. This works from like an anime perspective of just watching it, and a dueling perspective because he can keep himself going. Some of you might be saying, well, why wouldn't he just get his Egyptian god back? Well, he wouldn't do that because he could bring Slifer back, attack, destroy Shining Flare Wingman, do a little bit of damage, but then at the end of the turn, it's going to go back to the grave and he's got no protection again. So that wouldn't be a good play. So I think the Dark Magician play
probably
makes sense.
It has more staying power.
Hats in his hand. And he's got so many other cards in his hand that this could eventually lead to more plays that he can do. And why else do I like this? Well, Jaden is a monster that if it destroys a monster, it inflicts damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack. So it'd be kind of tense to have these magical hats in the field. There's a Dark Magician underneath one of them, and he knows that if he destroys that, he's going to take 2,500 damage. And since he's got a Buster Blader in hand, he could stall out until he gets a polymerization, use Dark Magician with Buster Blader to get Dark Paladin out, and then, I don't know, you could do so much more stuff with this. I mean, what does each...
It could be that, to be fair. I've actually tried delving into this format. I might delve back into it. Singleton, think like Commander, right? Singleton character deck format. I might delve back into this. That might actually be really cool to actually delve into for like content. And let me know if you're interested. If you'd be interested in like, I don't know, a character duel format, I guess. Let me know. Back on subject, right? But I think the Dark Magician play makes sense, and I think it'd be even cooler to see Dark Paladin because it really doesn't have enough love. So being able to just drop a Dark Paladin would be, yes, Dark Magician would be iconic, it'd be symbolic. Being able to drop that Dark Paladin, a lot of people would be happy with that. That, you know, the next boss monster up, if you will. And I think that would more than likely be the play. Yes, absolutely. You can go with the brain. Yeah, absolutely. You can go with something like Monster Reborn to get to Dark Magician faster, or Slifer. That's the thing, is there's so many different ways that this can go depending on what's drawn and how many turns we're thinking this is going to go. Because if not, as I said, the only real way we might know is literally going through and simulating every potential draw for both characters in the next turn and even next two turns, and then take the average of who won. If we were to do this scientifically, right?
Duelists have left in their arsenal. Yugi has Valkyrion, Buster Blader, Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, Obelisk the Tormentor, the Winged Dragon of Ra.
Are those tokens, or do we actually get the Karibo brothers? I feel like these are Oricas, potentially?
His fusion monsters, Dark Paladin, and obviously he has all of his powerful spells and traps as well. And Jaden as well, he still has all of his extra deck left. He has so many different monsters for different situations, and also he still has Yubel, which he hasn't summoned.
That was actually a really, going back to that's a really hot collection, actually. Like, I'm actually jealous of that.
So many different monsters for different situations, and also he still has Yubel, which he hasn't summoned, and also he has access to Neos Wiseman, and going a bit further, even his Divine Neos. Let's be honest.
Divine Neos felt like a collaboration work to defeat darkness. That kind of was what that felt like. I don't think Divine Neos... I mean, but that's the thing is... Actually, he could probably go Divine Neos is the thing. So you could have the escalation to Dark Paladin versus Divine Neos. You could have that as kind of a... like... Cast Emperor and Yugi then brought out Dark Paladin. Yeah. Like Dark Paladin's been very seldom seen in the anime.
Who doesn't get out their ultimate boss monsters in the final duel of a series? It's just normally what happens. So let's be fair, this duel has a lot more turns left to go after the duel had ended for the viewers. And while it appeared Yugi had the advantage, once his turn ended, it would have switched back to Jaden being in control. And Yugi, despite an impressive hand advantage, would need to draw something to help him out. Which, for Yugi, of course, that isn't difficult, let's be honest. And this back and forth would then continue more and more. So to wrap up the answer to this question, who was going to win the duel between Yugi and Jaden? From a simple analysis point of view, from everything we have seen, it is unclear. I'm not sure how it would have gone based on the stats and facts and
there's just too much there. There's too much to really like, and that's the thing is like, I mean, I like Jaden. I'm biased towards Jaden. There's so much that goes into that. So much calculation would have to go into this to even attempt to get a real answer.
Fortunately, it's ambiguous. However, I personally can tell you who I thought won the duel. But to do that, we need to look at the very first episode of the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX series. Specifically, its title. The title of the first episode was Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, The Next King of Games. Or the Japanese title, The One Who Succeeds Yugi. The word succeed is defined as someone who takes over a throne. With that title in mind, I reckon Jaden eventually got out his wing Karibo and probably used it with Transcendent Wings as a final play against maybe the God cards. That depends if monster effects are able to affect the Egyptian cards, because it's really up in the air. It's really 50-50 sometimes if the anime lets them affect them or not. But then Yugi uses his own Karibo, discards it from his hand to negate all of the damage. This is again if that sort of works like that, because it's normally monster battle, but this is the anime as well.
Yeah.
Maybe it can negate one big blast of damage. Who knows? After this, I reckon that Jaden would still have lost. I think that Yugi would have had one more play and would have beat Jaden. Only by a hair, by a fraction, Yugi would have won. But I hear you cry, Sam, you just said...
I don't know. Like, my own bias, being a fan of Jaden, I think Jaden still lost. Because he does he does obviously thank Yugi in that weird, well, not weird, in that ambiguous manner, right? But I still think he loses because he still has some growth that he wants to do, and he lost so much to get to the point that this duel happened and then regained so much more. So I think that he still has some growth, and we could have seen maybe I felt that this was a battle that Jaden necessarily wasn't meant to overcome, but it reminded him what he had lost and what he is needing to strive for is with someone who has Jaden bias, how I, kind of theory craft that.
The first episode was called The Next King of Games, or The One to Succeed Yugi. So wouldn't Jaden need to win to succeed Yugi? Yes and no. I personally don't think it's this Yugi in the past that he needs to succeed. I think that he has succeeded
actual
the
Yugi
of the present. The one that sent him back in time. This poses some questions. What you saying that past Yugi is better than a more older, refined Yugi? I guess so, because this Yugi has 3 Egyptian god cards and the Pharaoh by his side as well. So I don't know, I think it is. I do think that Jaden becomes the next king of games after this duel against past Yugi. It's also worth noting that what Jaden says at the end implies he lost, saying he wants to get stronger, and when he does, he's sure to try and duel him again. But then he does say gotcha as well, which is something that he says when he wins a duel, similar to That's Game in the dub. So who really knows? Who really knows what happened at the end of this duel?
Yeah.
And honestly, there's a chance that this duel just doesn't have an ending, because the whole point of this duel was to get Jaden to love dueling again.
No.
That happened, so technically we didn't need the rest of the duel, which is a shame, but that's something. Regardless of all of that, that was my opinion on who won the final duel of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX series. I asked all of you guys in a poll to tell me who you thought would win, and
Jesus,
these were the results.
66%.
Majority said Yugi, but surprisingly, a lot of you also thought about a draw. I didn't think that,
yeah,
but some of you did. I do apologize that I couldn't give a definitive answer.
Like we had main plot point draws in GX. So, O'Brien, what's his name? It's O'Brien in the sub. Axel Brody, that one. Pyro duelist, right? Volcanic Doomfire. The Volcanic deck. He and the Supreme King tied So I mean, we've had big plot points with ties, to be fair.
Like the other two videos, but the duel finishes so early, it's really hard to decide. But anyway,
is it bad that I remember Axel Brody's like sub name versus his dub name? That's just such a weird, like, how do I not remember Axel?
I'd love to know your speculations on how you think the rest of this duel would have gone, who do you think would have won, and everything. But regardless, thank you all for watching this video. Bye everyone.
No, I think this was the best way that they could have done this, honestly, and leaving it ambiguous was, I think, the correct move. One, from a narrative standpoint. Two, to please all the fans, right? This was a very fan servicey duel, in my opinion, and leaving it ambiguous, just not everything has to be explained. I've gone over this a number of times where Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, The Paths of the Dead, right? Stuff like that's left ambiguous. Who are the identity of the Nazgul? We know Cumul the Easterling. We know that the Witch King of Angmar was potentially a very powerful lord in Numenor, but the other seven we really don't know, right? Things like that that are just, yeah, there's mention of them. Yeah, they kind of exist, but they don't really, you know, they're not really fully expanded upon. And good pieces of media, good pieces of literature, fiction, etc. will do that. You're left speculating years down the line, and not every moment does need to be clearly explained. Not everything needs to be clearly outlined. Yes, some things absolutely can, but that's part of the magic of writing a good story. Is sometimes it's not really a story about if Jaden overcame Yugi. It's really not. It was Jaden regaining what he had lost, and that Jaden has more adventures to fulfill, which is always a sore point for me, because the next animation we even saw with Jaden in it was Bonds Beyond Time. And then the next after that was like, what, the 777th anime episode? We had the callbacks, right? Like, I'm sad. I would love to see a time fuse series where we just get to see all of the pro tags just go at it. That'd be really cool. Yeah, he was in Venice. Yeah, he had adventures he had to go on. So, alas, what are your thoughts? Do you think that I brought some context to this? Do you think that I added too much to this? Do you think that both characters going at it was the correct call? Do you think it being left ambiguous was the good call? Let me know in the comment section, and definitely go check out TGS Anime. He puts in a lot of good work in these videos, and it's a really, really good series. I love his stuff on this. But that's enough for me for now, and I'll see you in the next one.